is going to change roles now. It's almost like he's Superman and he ran into the closet and whipped on his cape. And
it's the cape.
It's the cape.
It gives me superpowers.
The Wild West Hackin Fest cake. Cape.
Cake. No one ever regrets the second piece of cake.
No, this is true. This is true. John is absolutely right. BB is my go-to web app guy. First of all, at Black Hills, I have to say, I get deep into web apps, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I know the API is not complicated, but darn it, BB, where are you?
Well, they're so different from everything else, right? I mean, there's nothing Windows domainish about it. There's nothing exploit development about it. You're building these frameworks to control things that I'm exactly the same way with those. With you, I don't know. The framework's not working. The C2's not working. Joff, I need your help. It's the same thing.
It's really funny, right? We've all got different talents, and fortunately, unlike the old days at Black Hills, fortunately, we've grown enough that we can sort of branch out into these different areas and express those talents, which has been a lot of fun. But BB has a talk coming up. Let's see, BB, what are you going to talk about? I never look at the agenda. It's terrible.
I'll give you two guesses. I'm talking about web apps.
All right.
Not exactly web apps. I'm talking about developer tools in the browsers. Actually, I'm just going to talk about Firefox because that's the one that I use. Because the thing that I love to do the most, the reason I have a web app pen testing class is because I love to show this stuff to people, because so much stuff is just kind of buried and hidden, and it's there for the taking. You just have to know that it's there. And there's so many ways you can look. There's so much. I mean, people talk about the whole imposter syndrome thing. And I think part of what feeds into that is there are so many directions you can go in security that you'll never know them all. So of course there's going to be things that you feel like a complete newbie at, and you don't know where to begin. So I try to help people find those things for web apps so they can learn those and have some fun. And some folks maybe change careers, get jobs doing what they want to do. It's very exciting. So
good stuff. Well, look, I'll just get off the screen and let you do your thing. So over to BB. Take it away, sir.
All right. So I'm going to talk about the free tools that are built into your web browser, the developer tools and some JavaScript for hacking web apps, because that's a fun thing we can do. This is kind of an excerpt from my class going on the same time Bose is going on, 4 days, 16 hours, $395, modern web app pen testing. This is a little part of a section from the class, a little bit modified, that I think stands on its own, and I wanted to share with you here. So I can't share videos and the sound, so I put a link in the Discord, and I would like you all to watch this YouTube video while I sit and wait. It's 7 seconds long. It's John Cleese telling you how to play the flute. And if you haven't seen it, watch. 5, 6. It's been 7 seconds by now. So now you know how to play the flute, right? Right? He told you. You blow in the one end and you move your fingers around. You've seen people playing the flute. That's what they do, right? That's it. Well, there's more to it than that, right? So knowing how to do something isn't always enough to make you effective at it. I've been learning music recently, and this has been quite a lesson for me to see that actually just in this way, just practicing, you just get better. Like I can't think my way better with music, where I feel like I can on computers. You can think your way better, but with music, you have it's muscles, it's your body, it's an embodied skill. You have to practice, and you get better, like not by degrees really. You get better like all of a sudden after lots of struggle. So this is one of my favorite quotes that I've seen attributed to Yogi Berra and Albert Einstein, which I think would be a great pair of people to have in the same room at the same time. Wouldn't that be great? In theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. And that's true. And so you need to practice. So I'm going to give you some things you can do to practice. That is one heck of a flute going on there, Peyton. Developer tools, a semi-guided tour, and it's semi-guided because I'm going to ask you to do this stuff along with me. I'm going to show you some things, but I want you to be in your browser playing with them yourself as I'm going through, because that's how you're going to remember what we talked about. So how did we used to learn how to build web applications? There was this thing called view source, and and I say and it's progeny. So view source and things that came after. View source was how everybody in the 90s learned how to make web apps. If you look at the timestamp in that screenshot, Monday, February 26, 1996, this is NCSA Mosaic, the first graphical web browser. And from the very beginning, there was view source. And what this was is what it still is. What it is, it shows you the page as it came back down from the server. So if you want to know how that page was laid out and how they did the things they did in that page, view source, it's right there. They can't hide it from you. Imagine if every program, every application you installed in your computer came with the source code. That's how web apps were, and they still are. They're more complicated, but they still can't help but give you the source code because it has to run in your browser on your machine. So this kind of got not really obsoleted by JavaScript, but what view source shows you is what you got back from the server. And so many applications now are very JavaScript heavy. A lot of stuff happens, the computation, the display, the rendering, the behavior happens on the client side. So what you're seeing is very rarely the same thing as what you downloaded. So view source is still there and it's still helpful, but it's not the answer to everything like it used to be. So one of the things I focus on in the web app classes is this idea of situational awareness. When you're testing a web app, you can think of each test, each exploit, each vulnerability is like a puzzle that you have to solve. How can I get cross-site scripting to work here? How can I get some injection attacks to work there? But before you can do that, you have to figure out where the puzzles are. It's not always readily apparent. Each web app is different. It may do something similar to the last web app you looked at, but it was written by different people using different frameworks at different times with different business needs. So they're all different, and that's what keeps them interesting. But if you can be familiar with how they work and some of the choices that developers have to make, you'll start to notice when things look fishy, when some part of the website doesn't look the same as the others, or maybe it's done in a way that looks noticeably different to you. That might be something interesting to spend time poking at. Different browsers have similar tools. They all call them developer tools, but it's not a thing. There's no standard for what developer tools is in a browser. So the Chrome ones are different from the Firefox ones. Lots and lots of overlap, but they're not identical. I do most of my testing in Firefox. That's why I'm talking about Firefox. If you use Chrome, please take a look at Greg Malcolm's talk that's linked here called Raiding the Armory. He talks about how to use Chrome's developers tools as a developer, what they're intended for, to make changes to a web app, the kinds of changes a developer would want to make. So you can see why this part is slow, how much memory is being used up here, why this thing isn't rendering the way it should. And you can have the tools read some files from your local disk and the rest of them from the server. So you can say, oh, I think the problem's in this file. Let me edit that one. And you can edit it in the browser, and it overrides the one that comes down from the server. So you can see what's going on very quickly without having to check anything in or deploy anything. And then once you've got it, now you can make that real change in your actual source code in your projects. So anyway, Greg Malcolm, Raiding the Armory, good talk about developer tools for developers. So play along with me. Open up Firefox right now. Open up a new tab, a new window, so you don't close down the dock if you don't want to. And get into developer tools. It's F12. It's Control-Shift-I on some computers. It's Command-Option-I on some computers. But on every computer, it's F12, or it's right-click anywhere and click Inspect Element. And that will drop you into the inspector, which is one of the developer tools. So if I'm ever running in a virtual machine and I can't for the life of me remember which key combination it's supposed to be through my host and into the VM, I fall back on right-click, Inspect Element. So there are several tools that are part of developer tools. There's the console. And a lot of folks, when they talk about developer tools, they talk about the console almost interchangeably. They'll say, oh, open the console and look in here. That's fine, but it's shorthand, and the console is just one of many developer tools. It shows you what's going on. The inspector shows you how things are put together. The inspector is kind of like view source, but it gives you the current state of things given everything that's happened since it was downloaded. So if the UI has changed because of JavaScript, the inspector shows you what it looks like right now, why it's rendered the way it is. It even shows you, like, we'll get into that. It shows you the style sheets and what rules were overridden and stuff. It's fascinating. There is a DOM tool, which is not one of the default tools. You have to turn this one on separately. That shows you the top-down view. That shows you the document object model. So at the top is the thing that contains everything, and then it breaks down from there. So there's top, and then there's window, and there's top.location. All those things start in the DOM. Everything that exists in the page is part of the DOM. So that's a nice place to look to see how a page is constructed, even if you're not going to mess with it. There's a storage tab that has, you can think of it as essentially little databases as well as cookies. There's a network tab that shows you all the traffic. If you have ever used Burp Suite or Z Attack Proxy, this is like the proxy history, but only of the current page. The current page and all the resources that were requested to render that page or that were called in by that page. And then there's the debugger, which is a debugger. It's actually a literal debugger for the JavaScript. You can set breakpoints, you can inspect variables, you can do all kinds of things in the debugger. Very debuggery things. It's very, very full-featured, that debugger. And this is what it looks like. I don't intend that you understand anything that's on this or read it or parse it out or make sense of it. This is what the developer tools look like when you first open them. And my point with this is that there's a ton. There's a lot of stuff in here. I suggest, if you're interested in web apps, that no matter what you're doing in your web browser, keep the console visible. If you're doing a pen test, absolutely. If you're just browsing for your normal whatever you browse for, if your social activities, I'm bored, I'm looking for things to read, I'm just scrolling with dead eyes through Reddit all night long, keep the console open, keep the console visible so you can see what's going on. You will learn a lot. You will notice that there are lots of common failures in web apps that are just part of how they work, but they expose to you the logic of how the browser is doing what it's doing and where that logic might break down sometimes. Now, do you have the console open, the developer tools open? See, I do it too, console developer tools. When you first open it, it either opens up on the side or on the bottom, and that's great. I like it on the bottom usually because then I have more of the viewport. I can see better what's going on, because if you shrink this way, things flow differently sometimes, or they just don't and they scroll off the side of the page and you can't see them. But one cool thing with the tools that's not obvious is you can have them in a separate window. You can click in the upper right there and you can detach it so that it's a whole separate window. So now if you have like two monitors, for example, you can have your page on one monitor and you can have your tools on the other monitor, and then you have all the screen real estate you could want. The only danger with that, I would do that all the time, but I can't keep track of things. The console and all the developer tools that you're looking at are showing you additional views of a particular page, so a particular tab in your browser. And if you have it at the bottom or on the side, it's obvious which one the tools are attached to because it's in the same big pane. But as soon as you detach it, now you have to remember which of those many tabs this developer tools window is associated with. And that is just beyond my skill. So I don't actually do that very often, but I think it's a pretty cool thing if you can keep track of it, or if you can just, keep yourself focused. On a pen test, it works because you're focused on one thing. But if you're just, like I said, if you're just scrolling through Reddit or doing whatever it is you do and you have it open for giggles to see what happens, you might wonder why it's not refreshing, because it's connected to a different tab than you're browsing. So the other thing about the console, as distinct from the developer tools, is the console can be attached to every other tool that's there. So you can look at just the console itself, or you can look at, say, the network tab, and you can open up a little console screen below that. And it's the escape key that turns that on and off in everything. So be aware of that also. Just because you're looking at the network tab doesn't mean you have to give up the console. You can have them both at the same time. So quickly about the console. The console shows you HTTP traffic, the requests and the responses. It shows you the summary of each one and shows you detail for them. It shows you references for the status codes and headers. What? References for status codes and headers? Yes. If you don't know what a particular header is used for, there's a little question mark and you click on it and it takes you to Mozilla's documentation about that header. The cool thing though, and the biggest reason I like to have the console open when I'm browsing and especially when I'm pen testing is because anything that gets sent to console.log gets logged in the console. That's right. And with JavaScript, there are no file handles in JavaScript. There's no standard in, standard out. So if you're writing like if you're writing an application in not JavaScript, in Python or C or whatever, and you want to get input to your program, you read from standard in. And if you want to give output out, you write to standard out, or maybe you write to a file. JavaScript doesn't have that. It has the console instead. So this is what developers do when they want to say, hey, I need to check on the status of this variable at this point. I'm not sure if I got the right value here, or I just want to make sure things are going well. If you've ever written a script, you've done this. You dump things to standard out just so that you can keep track of where you are. That's how we write software. And sometimes the developers don't remember to turn that off before it goes to production, or sometimes they don't think anyone's going to look at it. So why not leave it on? So sometimes you can get interesting information out of the application just by watching to see what scrolls by. So if you have the console open, just as a habit, you'll notice those things and you won't have to go looking for them. Now you also get browser errors and warnings. Well, you get browser errors and warnings all over the place, right? Not just there. So what kinds of warnings? You get CSP warnings. CSP is the Content Security Policy. And the Content Security Policy has some very deep corners in it. It's not so obvious what all it does. So the idea is, one of the things that it does is it can help defend against cross-site scripting. So cross-site scripting, canonically is reading a script from a different site and executing it. So there are content security policy directives you can enable in a web app to just disable that. So there's one that's you can disable inline scripts. So if I, as an attacker, can get JavaScript to show up in the response that comes from your server, so reflected JavaScript or even stored reflected XSS, or even stored XSS, that content security policy directive that says don't run inline scripts will prevent the script from running, even though it's there, even though I did everything right and I got my script in there and the syntax is perfect. CSP can block that. It can do a lot of other things too, and there are a lot of different parameters and different ways you can tweak that to make it like super custom and super nailed down narrow. So you can say this particular inline script is okay, but everything else is bad. And that's really, really easy to get wrong. And if you look in this screenshot here, that's the first thing, content security policy warning, ignoring unsafe inline within the script source. So, okay, so maybe you don't know what unsafe inline means. Now you know that's a thing you could look up, right? The next line there is request to access the cookie or storage on the URL was blocked because it came from a tracker and content blocking is enabled. So the website wants to do something, but I've got some content blocking in my browser. I've got some privacy things enabled so that the websites can't just do whatever the heck they want anymore. Now I'm in control, right? And I'm not going to let you send my data to some tracking site. So this is going on here. This is interesting for developers because that means part of their site's not working. It's interesting for the marketing people because now it means they're not getting their data tracking their users. It could be interesting for a pen tester because maybe there's some function that is dependent on that thing working. Regardless, it tells you something about how web technologies are working and how they're working or not working in this particular application. Some of these, if you look closely, you'll see this blue text. And blue text, since the beginning, since NCSA Mosaic, has meant active link. It means you can click on me and get more information. So if you don't know what's this came from a tracker, content blocking is enabled, learn more. Click on that and find out what that means. Why is that going on? These also, we don't have the learn more links down in the blocks for content security policy, but it tells you what's going on, tells you what's getting blocked. So that's why you want the console open. This stuff just shows up there. The network tab, the network tool, one of the developer tools, network, shows you every request and response as well. Well, the console actually doesn't show every request and response anymore. You have to enable it. Up in the top right, I'll show you when we get in there. You have to say, I want to see these things. Otherwise, they take up a lot of space. So the network does show every request and response because that's its job. It's the network tab. It adds filters so that you can show only responses that included particular content types. So maybe you're not interested in images. Maybe you only want to see scripts or HTML. You can do that. There's a freeform text filter box, so you can type in a word or a string, and it will only show you things that match that string. So you can get very precise on what it shows you. And there's also an edit and resend box. So those of you who use Burp, this is Burp Repeater built into your browser. It's right there. It's not as featured as Repeater, but you can just resend a thing. This is, if you're doing a pen test, if you're authorized to do this, you have to be careful with this. If you're doing it against, just for your own browsing, just for fun, if you're not actually on an authorized pen test, you have to be careful. But if you are authorized pen test and you see a request that maybe has a number in it somewhere, one of the parameters has a digit in it, edit and resend, change that digit, send it again, see if the response is different, all without ever leaving your browser. This little checkbox here that is not checked, you probably want to check that if you're doing this kind of work, because otherwise you're going to see a lot of HTTP 304 not modified responses because your browser likes to cache things for efficiency and other good reasons, but it blinds you to what's actually going on. So you want to check that disable cache button so that it is marked. And these here, you see the images guy is highlighted and the other ones are not. That's how that filter works. So I'm only looking at images right now. Those are my other choices: HTML, CSS, JavaScript, all those things that I've chosen not to look at right now. The network tab in the details. So if you go back on that previous page, if you click on any one of those items, any one of those rows, this is what you get now. You can see I squished it over to the side there. And this is an education. This is a course in how HTTP and web browsers work. Go here, spend some time, click on everything that's clickable one day and just see what's there so that you know for the future when you want to look at it. So this particular file, it's in the network tab. The request URL is up there. I've highlighted the things that I think are most interesting here. So that gives you the full URL to that resource. If you wanted to request it with another tool or whatever, now you know exactly where it came from. The status code was HTTP 200, that green number there, that's okay. Version is HTTP 2. There was some discussion, I think Paul Vixie talked about HTTP versions in his DNS discussion. Who knew those would overlap ever? HTTP 2, so this is not HTTP 1.1. This is a different version of HTTP. That's interesting. There's the edit and resend button on the right. The response headers come first. The request headers are at the bottom. And as a pen tester, I would have it the other way, but they're not pen tester tools, they're developer tools. And the developers are probably more interested in the response from the server than they are in the request. Do you see all those question marks there in that vertical box I made there? Every single one of those is live. If you're doing this now, click on one of those. It's going to take you to the Mozilla Project's developer tools documentation, and it's going to tell you everything it knows about that particular response header. What does it mean? What are the, if it has enumerated values for it, like it can only be set to certain things, it will tell you what those are and what they mean. If it can be a string, it will tell you, it'll give you some example strings, what might be there. But this is great. So so cross-site scripting, I'm going to assume maybe a little too much, but if you don't know what cross-site scripting is, it's essentially I'm having a script come back down and your browser is going to execute it. So it has to come down as a script. There's a header here called content type, and the content type is set by the server, and it tells the browser what kind of content is in the body of this response. This one is set to image/svg plus XML. There are others are text/HTML is the HTML. Application/JavaScript would be JavaScript. If this actually came up in just this week, I was looking at it at Webapp with another one of the testers, and he had gotten a script to come back from the server, but it wasn't running, and it wasn't running only because the only reason it wasn't running, everything worked, he did everything exactly right, but the only reason it wasn't running was because it was returned under a content type of text/plain, and it also had another one. I don't think it's on this one. There's one that says no sniff, that says the browser is not allowed to make a guess about what the content type is. If you don't tell it the content type, browsers they're kind of smart. They know what different content types look like, so they can make a guess about whether this is an image or it's HTML or whatever. So a response that comes back under text/plain with the no sniff directive enabled is never going to execute. The developers are doing that one right. But if you didn't know that, how would you know that? This is how you would know it. You would come click on the question marks. Let's take a look at the tools. Hopefully you've been doing this, right? You're looking at these things while I'm rambling here. I want to show you just a couple of things. The console, this is the web console, right? Not developer tools, but the console. This is what it does. This is the documentation from Mozilla about the console. So here's the console, and if I reload this page, you see what all happens. Some cookies are missing the recommended same site attribute. There are 3 of them, and I expand them. This tells me what they are and why I should care. The network tab, see, I've got the console is still down here, and escape makes it go away and doesn't make it come back up again. Anyhow, I didn't want to keep it there because we want to look at what's here in the network. I've got the cache disabled here. I've got the DOM option enabled, so that is under the ... thing, or F1. The tools you can enable are over here, and I just checked the DOM item so that I had that. I'm going to get rid of what's new just because it takes up some space. While we're here, there are screenshots. You can do screenshots in here as well. So screenshot behavior, I want to put the screenshot on the clipboard, and I also want to, I want to be able to take a screenshot of the entire page. Did you see the little camera pop up? Look up here on the right, screenshot goes away, comes back. So now you can take a screenshot from within the developer tools. And I had it just copied to the clipboard. And if I try to show you what it looks like right now, I'm going to mess up my screen, I'm sure. So this is why you're following along at home. Take a look at that one yourself and see what you see. Here's a more interesting page, the Flickr Explore page. I'm just going to reload it so that everything becomes fresh. We see a lot more interesting stuff in the console here. And when I go to network, I'm going to click on the first item because this is the response to the first request. And everything else comes after that. Now here are the response headers, content security policy. Look at all that stuff in content security policy. Remember I said it gets detailed and it gets difficult. This is why. This is one way in which it does that. But there's help. Look at all this about content security. Look how small the thumb is here. Look at how long this is. There's so much information here. Let's see. Yes, I want to show you the header. So the question marks next to the headers, all these things have documentation for you to take a look at. Also, this one we can filter again. If I want to just see the HTML, then I just see that one. If I want to see all the XHR requests, I can look at just those. Those might be interesting. Fonts, images, media, WS, I think is WebSockets. So we've got all of those. If we look at just images, because this is an image-happy page, these are all the images. And if I just mouse over them, it shows me a preview of that image. What is that? Look at that. Are they returning all of their navigation images as a single image and they just render a part of that image in the page? I don't know, but that's sure what it looks like. I don't see that image as an image in the page anywhere. That's cool. How do they do that? What else do we have? So then you can see the images kind of show up in the order that they appear in the rendered page. All right, back to the slides. There is a storage tab. The storage tab is where the browser keeps the things that it stores. The cookies are there. The cookies are, we all know what cookies are, right? They're small little things that are scoped to a particular domain. You get one when you log in. They use it to track you around the internet, see what you're up to. There's the cache, which is not the disk cache. This is not the cache that goes along with a 304 not modified response. It's the cache interface from the web APIs, and I have yet to see anybody use this. There's the indexed DB, which is what it sounds like. It's an actual indexed database. It stores a ton of information, or can store a ton of information. If you want 10 megabytes, that's a ton of information, right? That's like a whole box of floppy disks. Local storage and session storage, these are actually both called DOM storage. They're both different versions of DOM storage. The difference is that session storage is like a session cookie, in that when you close your browser, it goes away. Local storage is persistent, like a persistent cookie. These are limited to 5 megabytes per origin, and they are two separate things. And this is interesting because these things don't show up in your proxy. They might show up in your proxy. The results of them might show up in your proxy, but there is nothing you will see in HTTP traffic that says this item is destined or came from local storage. It's not part of the HTTP spec like cookies are. Cookies, you'll see the header. You'll see a set cookie header in responses. In most cases, cookies can be set with JavaScript as well, but cookies are always sent in requests in the cookie header. So cookies, you can't miss those if you're looking at the traffic. You can miss all this other stuff. So it's interesting to know what the browser is storing about you. Go to wherever you are right now in your browser, look at the storage tab and see what is in there. Look under the local storage and session storage. If there's nothing interesting, go to Amazon or go to some place that you think might be interested in keeping track of you over time and see what they're storing in there. A lot of times it's very opaque data, like I don't know what to make sense of. I don't know what it is to make sense of it, but there's a lot of it. Sometimes you can tell what it is. And the cookies, how many of you have a browser extension like add and edit cookies so you can change cookies, delete them, add new ones, whatever? Those are great, and I'm not going to say that you should not use them, but you don't need them because it's all built in here into the storage tab. Any one of those cookies, wherever you are right now, you can right-click on it and edit it. You can also right-click in that table area and add a new one. It's easy to miss the first time you do it. When you say add, you might expect to get like a dialog box to fill in the blanks. You don't. It just adds a cookie with a random GUID as the name of the cookie. And if you're not looking, if you blink at the wrong time, you'll miss it. But it's there, and it's your cookie, and you can do whatever you want with it now. So that's a place where you would do like a pen tester would add admin equals 1, or you would look for cookies that have a value that you can understand, a meaningful string. And you would see what happens if I change that string. What happens if I delete that cookie? What happens if I add the change, if there's one that has a privilege level? What if I change that privilege level? Here's a place you can do that persistently. You're not changing it like in the request as it goes through your proxy. You're changing it where it lives. So once you've made that change, the old value is gone and will never be seen again unless something overrides it, sets it back to where it was. What about the burp? I just scrolled up. That's a big long thing there, Doug. The burp Chromium included browser. I have not used that much yet because it's Chromium and because it's new. But yes, burp does have an embedded version of the Chromium browser now, so you do not have to use a separate browser. How exactly that might work is, I don't know exactly how that, you're probably still going to have, does it have developer tools built in? I don't know. And if it does, it's going to be the Chrome version, not the Firefox version. So we would have to look at that another time. What else do we got? I wanted to show you the storage in Flickr. So local storage. See, the cache storage is empty. The cookies, holy cow, look at all those cookies. I'm not logged in at Flickr. I'm just browsing. Index database is empty. Local storage has several things, but they're all pretty innocuous, they seem like. And then session storage, remember this is the one that gets deleted when I close my browser. That's got some URLs and stuff in it. I don't know. It'd be interesting to know when you're testing a web app or just using one, what does it store here? So now we're onto the inspector. The inspector, remember this is like view source, but you can it shows you the current state, not just the way it was received. So it's better than view source because it shows you, it keeps up with things as they change. There's a live view once you have the inspector open. So do this, whatever page you're in, just right click on anything and choose inspector or click on the inspector tab. And things get collapsed in there. There's little disclosure triangles on the right. You can click those to open and close sections of the HTML and the response. And then as you mouse through that, you'll notice in the viewport where the page is rendered, things will get highlighted. And that will show you which part you're mousing over in the source, which part of the page that corresponds to, so you know where you're at. And you can edit the page live. And this is the only practical thing for this is for developers. And the other practical thing is practical jokes. So if you want to cause trouble, you can cause a lot of trouble with Inspector. So here's a tweet from John Strand. This is his pinned tweet at the top of his tweets. And it tells you that all of our webcasts are recorded and posted to our YouTube channel. That's a question that we get frequently during times when we're doing things online. People want to know if we're recording. So yes, we are recording. But you can make John say whatever you want him to say. You can just right click in there and you can change the text. And now I have a screenshot that proves John put me in charge. So it's all up to me now. And I just have to show this screenshot to the other testers, and there'll be no question about who's in charge now. But if you go and look at this, you'll see the original tweet. So like I said, it's limited utility, but it can be funny. The inspector in the console for useful things. In the inspector, you might see JavaScript functions. You might see things. Yes, deleted user. You might see things like that, like setting cookies. You might see that sort of stuff in the scripts that you're looking at. And the console is your access into the page as it came from the server. So anything you type in there, you can type in JavaScript. Anything you type in there has the same access that the JavaScript that comes from the real server would have. So you're in the browser. You can call functions in the JavaScript that you wouldn't otherwise be able to call. So here's an example of a thing that you might look for. There's a Crypto.js is a JavaScript cryptography library. And in the example code, they show you how to use it, which is great. And at the bottom there, they have that call to console.log. Remember I said developers like to send things to the console to keep track of what's going on. This is something they might do. If they do this, then you will see the original text in your console, whatever original text sorts out to be. If they didn't do this, you can do it yourself. If you go through the source and you find that there is a variable called original text, you can just type in console.log original text, and it will print the original text for you. Also, if there's like a secret key in there and that's stored in a variable, you can just console.log secret key, and you're going to get whatever's in that secret key. So let's take a quick look at Inspector. This is John's tweet. So if I wanted to change what John's saying here, I could right click on this and say inspect element. Even though the inspector is already open, it scrolls it to it for me. So now as I mouse over stuff down in the inspector, I get highlights up on top. So I don't see the words yet, but I know they're somewhere in here. So if I open up this span, there we go, that's the word. And so I change this by double clicking and saying whatever I want to say, and then click outside of it. And now it says what I wanted it to say. If you look over here on the right as well, you'll see the actual cascade of the style sheet. So cascading style sheets means that there are style sheets and they come at different levels, and different levels, more specific ones, override less specific ones. So you can see what the rules are that are applied, what the style sheet rules are that are applied, and you can tell where it shows you where they came from. So there's a style sheet with this name, and it sets these things. And then this one was inherited from the div that it lives in. And this one was inherited from the div. This was inherited from the body. So you can tell where it's all coming from. This is, again, way more interesting for developers than pen testers. But just the power that's in here, it's amazing to me, the power that's in here, this free thing that like they don't mention anywhere. When you get a new version of Firefox, it's not like, hey, get the new Firefox because there's awesome developer tools. They don't even mention it. It's just but it's there just for free. It's great. So back to the slides here. Are you following along? Are you doing this yourselves on some sites? Are you seeing what's going on? I'm hopefully just guiding you. I would love to just like look over your shoulder and say, hey, click on that, click on that. But this is the best I can do. So I don't want you just watching me. I want you clicking along and doing stuff yourself as you go through. Looking for questions. I'm not seeing a lot of yes, Sunaroros, you got it. See, now the word is spreading. I'm in charge. See how easy that was. All these other talks about how to get out there and how to make your own path. You could just lie and cheat. You can customize the tools. When you are in there, you can hit F1 or you can hit those little ... And I showed you before where to add the DOM pane. You can show it in dark mode if you're a dark mode fan. I know people who like dark mode really like dark mode, so that's available. The screenshot button is there. The other place, do you know the other place where the screenshot button is in Firefox? I got to show you this because if you didn't know this was here, maybe this is going to make you happy. So let's close everything down here and put this back to regular zoom size. See how big this is? It can't fit. If I want that whole thing in one screenshot, I'm going to have to either use like a third-party tool to do that. There are plugins that will do it, or I'm going to have to take a couple screenshots and stitch them together myself. Or I can right-click and I can say, take a screenshot. And then I can say, I want just what's visible, or I want the full page. And there it is. This is the screenshot it just took. And now I can save it, or I can copy and paste it somewhere. Very, very awesome for long pages. I'll use this sometimes when I'm doing a web app pen test, and if I have to do the Qualys SSL server test thing, if you've ever run that one runs to pages and pages. Sometimes I'll do a screenshot of that this way, so I have the entire thing. And if somebody really wants to read it, they can, but it doesn't have to take up a lot of room in the reports. Back to PowerPoint. So once you're in the console, the other thing about the console, besides things scrolling past and seeing whatever gets logged to the console, is it's a particular kind of console. It's a JavaScript console. So you can type JavaScript into it, and that JavaScript runs and has full access to the DOM of whatever page you're in, which is something you would never get anywhere else unless you were actually returning the content from the server. So what can you can ask the console questions about how the server is built, or about how that page is built. And when I say ask it questions, what I mean is you can tell it to print things out. You can do, console.log, do this. Go to the console wherever you are right now and type in console.log and then put the word top in parentheses and hit return. Whatever you get, you can expand on. There's a little disclosure triangle. You can click on that and it'll open up, and that will contain more things that you can open up and open up and open up. I forget when I'm looking at JavaScript, if I want to look at is top and window the same thing? Is window and document the same thing? I can't remember sometimes which one is which. They are different things, but sometimes they point to the same thing depending on where you are on the page. So sometimes they're equal and sometimes they're not equal. And if all you want to do is show the return value of that thing, you don't need console.log. You can just type the thing in and it will give it to you. So if you type in top triple equals window and hit enter, you'll get a true or a false based on whether or not the object that is top is the same object that is window. So if you don't remember how those things are, this can help remind you very quickly without having to look it up or ask somebody. So what more interesting things might you be able to do with your JavaScript on that page? Well, the types of things you can do are you can look at whatever is in the page that is interesting to you at the time. So maybe the links on the page are interesting to you. Maybe you want to know, given this page, what is every link? I just want a list of all the links. I don't want to have to find them. I don't want to have to mouse over stuff to have it exposed to me, whatever. I want to know what all the links are. Well, you can type this into your console. var links equals document.getElements by tag name A, because A is the anchor. That's the name of the HTML tag that has links in it. And then that links variable contains all of those things. Another way to get at that is just the the object called document.links. That's part of the document object model. You don't have to do get elements by tag name. You can just say, give me all the documents, all the links in the document. You can do the same with images. Anything that it's in an img tag exists in document.images. So now you've got them. What are you going to do with them? You can modify the links in the page, just like you could in JavaScript if you were a developer. If you wanted a link to point somewhere else based on something the user did, you can change the target of that link using JavaScript without having to reload the whole page. So we can do that too. In JavaScript, or actually ECMAScript 15, I think this is, they added the for of syntax, which is it's like a for each loop in JavaScript. So for link of document links, it goes through all of the document links, and on each iteration through that loop, it sets the current link to link. I maybe should have used a different word there to make that more obvious what's going on. But each time through that list of that loop, the variable called link has the current link, which is an object and not just a string. So what I want to do here is I want to add, at the end of every link, I want to add a parameter that says admin equals true. Why? Because it's an easy example to show you. You might want to add something else there. So you do that by finding the link.href, and you just append admin equals true to it. And then I changed the style of the link to make it easier to see where those links are. I added a 5-pixel solid blue border around it. So this is something that you could do in the, I didn't say that as text. I was going to paste that into the talk for you, but I can't. But it's in the PDF that you have. So you can run that guy. Here's another one, and this one is maybe more useful than that one. Maybe you want to collect identifiers. So you want to get on Flickr's Explore page, maybe you want to get every image that's on there. Maybe you're on a particular person's page and you want to get a list of all their friends. Maybe it's a social media thing and you want to get their friends list easily. For pictures, you can put this in. Do I have this one? Oh no, I have just the tag. I'm pasting. So that's the one to find all the links and do something with them. And I'll use this one in a minute to show you where that was useful. But if you have images as images, they're in that object called document.images. And you can create an array of all the URLs that those images are, because remember, the image in HTML it's an object. It's not just the thing it points to. There are more properties that are part of that object. But if you just want the URLs where all those images live, you want the source, because image tag is img source src equals the address of the thing. So this will go through the page, find all the images, and print out on the console the URL of every one of those images. And now what I would do with this is I would copy and paste it out of the console into a text editor so that I could do something more useful with it. So I'm not constrained to just using JavaScript to play with it. Now I can use Python, I can use Bash, I can use whatever else I want to use it for. Maybe I want to use this as input for Burp Intruder. Maybe I want to see if I can log in as a different user and try to download all these images again. That's something real world, simple use of this particular one. And the last thing, this is what I put in the chat. This was a real world use of this not too long ago. We have at BHIS we have a chat room called the Jukebox, where people paste in links to songs, and they tend to be links to songs on YouTube. And Jordan realized that this was like a treasure trove of great music and awful music at the same time. And he wanted to know if there was a way that we could just pull all those links out of the chat. And we went back and forth. Well, maybe there's some tools, maybe there's some JavaScript frameworks, maybe there's some plugins we could use to extract those things. And maybe so, but you can just extract them yourself because they're all on the page there and you have access to the console. So this script gets every link. So links equals document get elements by tag name A. So everything that's an anchor, and that's how those show up. And for every one of those links, if the string YouTube appears in the link, log that link to the console. And then you have in the console a list of all the links on that page that have YouTube in them. So this is a naive approximation of links to YouTube. It would pick other things that just had the string YouTube in them, so that it wasn't perfect, but it was good enough for a list of links to scroll through by hand. Let me show you that one. So here I'm on YouTube. And did I save them? Right. Yes. So this is that exact script. I don't know if you can read that well. But this is essentially the same thing that I pasted in the chat, but it's all in one line so that I don't accidentally end it early. So and I didn't get that extra variable in there just to save myself some time. So for every link, if the link contains YouTube, that is, if the index of YouTube is not -1, then let's log that link. And if I hit enter now I get all of the links on this page that point to YouTube, which there's a lot of them because it is YouTube. But now look at all those. Now, depending on the application you're looking at, this could be a super useful list of things to check access rights for, to get a collection of things. Maybe you've got documents, maybe you want to download documents and look through them for usernames or passwords or document metadata, that sort of thing. This is a way to do that. So other things you can do, and this needs to stop. The other thing you can do in here is I mentioned anything that's part of the document object model is available to you through the console. So any JavaScript variable, any JavaScript function, you can call all those things. You can play with the variables, you can call the functions. So you can go through and you can look through the JavaScripts for interesting function names or interesting variable names, or just start reading the code if it's not that long and see what might pop out as interesting. And then call those. Console.log variable name, or just type the variable name, or call the function and let it give you an error and say, oh, you need to add another parameter to that function call, whatever. Play with it and see if you can make it work. Or if that's too hard, or if you can't find where things are, autocomplete. Autocomplete is built in, and it autocompletes anything that's in the DOM. So if you just start typing words that might be interesting words, it will pop up a list of potential completions for you. So start typing in password and see if there's a variable called password or a function called password or key or token or whatever it might be, a meaningful string in the application that you're playing with. And the console will happily look it up for you and tell you if that's something that exists or not to play with. So keep the console open. Even if you're just browsing, you're just noodling around the web, keep the console open. And see what's going on. Stay curious about what's there, play around, and you'll have more fun on the web, and you'll be a better tester because you'll notice stuff. Thank you for coming. That was my talk.